hand, heaving around her face. As she swiped it back, she pivoted in all directions. That's the city. We've come in a straight line.
As you can see, I did something off camera.
She pointed an inconsequential finger towards the dark shadows. Daryl shook his head. Why have we come? The teary madness was evident in his tone, but I was too tired to look up from my seated position against the big rock. I stared at the ground and wished I had something to blow my nose into. The others began setting up a makeshift camp, positioning torches and stone cracks and lining out jackets to sit on. When I finally did look up again, I could see that Margaret and Daryl moved from their position on the rock and took up among the others. The ceiling, alien, and starless with those monsters made me uneasy. I spent my time counting the people in our camp. 28 scared faces. Each of them looking wearily over their shoulders at every small noise. Margaret moved from person to person, and when she came to ask me if I was feeling alright, I shrugged it off. She left me and continued roaming the camp with her hands on her hips, scanning further vicinities. Margaret pulled a hairband from her wrist and pulled her hair back into a ponytail. For a long moment I was surprised at just how agile and full of energy the old bird was. Perhaps those daily walks through the neighborhood were paying off for her. I wish I'd felt the same in that moment. After glancing around to make sure no one else was watching me, I quickly took the long sleeve of my shirt and blew my nose into it. A few people looked my way, but quickly went back to whatever conversations they were having. I'm so tired. Rubbing my temples, I rose to my feet and moved to the same rock that Margaret and Daryl had been standing on. After shifting myself slowly up, I began to look around. Near the city, perhaps a mile away, were the watchers with the spotlights. I could just make out the vague, shadowy figures riding atop them, and I briefly wondered whether they would be able to see me if they were to shine their lights in my direction. I rubbed my eyes. They felt tender to the touch, and I could scarcely keep them open. How I wished for the warm comfort of my bed in those hours. How I wished I'd never checked on Harold. It would have been better for me, better for everyone if I'd only left him be. The urge to leave that place was ever growing, ruminating in murmurs. Some of the group wanted to inspect the city, still transfixed by its spell, while others wanted to leave. It seemed the half that wished to carry forward had it in their heads that the only way out was through. Margaret was one of the more vocal about deserting whatever horrors lurked in that place, and I was right by her. Daryl and Linus both were vehemently defending that we continue. Once everyone's rested up, we should head on, said Linus. Just like Harold said, there's some truth to be found here. What was all that digging if not for this? Daryl, with his arms crossed, nodded alongside Linus. I shook my head. There's no reason for it. We've been duped, guys. Harold didn't know what he was talking about. He was grieving. There was no reason for us to jump in and start digging too. What were we even doing it for? This was true. I couldn't even remember why I decided to help dig in the first place. It was all so pointless. That's bubkiss, said Linus. And you know it just as well as I do. It's a general discontent with the state of affairs that's brought us here, and I only intend to resurface once I've found the purpose I've been looking for all my life. There's a magic to this place, and it exists for a reason. It would have been nice if that were true, but looking around at the deep shadows of the massive cavern, I could only see desolation. Margaret cut in. I don't care what you do, I'm going back. She studied the group. Those of you that want to leave can come with me or not. Mixed expressions of hopefulness and fear made me sick. It seemed that we were destined to split up with half of us going on and half of us going back. I only hoped in that moment that we'd actually be able to find our way out of the cavern. Just as it seemed that Linus was going to respond, the first fish fell from the cavernous ceiling. It was some cod. Upon seeing it there, I blinked to make sure I'd not merely conjured it from my imagination. It came from seemingly nowhere at all, but it landed on the flat ground in the center of us gathered. It flopped and its mouth sucked and puckered at nothing as it reversed round. I reached a timid foot forward to nudge it with my shoe, as Margaret peered up at the ceiling. As the words, "Where did that come from?" came from my mouth, another fish fell directly onto Margaret's upturned face. She shrieked and kicked the thing away. Within minutes, wet plods surrounded us as it began to rain down a waterfall torrent of ocean fish. A flounder bounced off my shoulder, slapping me with its tail. We took up with our arms over our heads to cover ourselves from the incoming barrage of sea animals. It was the most insane thing I'd seen in my entire life. The air smelled of salt, and the pattering of the fish landing on the ground is a noise I wouldn't soon forget. The screams of my fellow human echoed all around, barely above the sounds of the fish storm. We began to take cover near the great flat rock. I dove across people and wriggling fish to reach it, pushing and shoving and getting shoved in return. In a panic, my shoulder met the rock, and I turned to look back at my neighbors frantically searching for shelter. In the uproar, I could see that Daryl was fighting with something clinging to his face as it wrapped its snaky limbs around his throat. He attempted to wrench the thing off, but it only pulled itself more tightly around him. It took far too long for my brain to realize what I was seeing. The thing holding itself to Daryl was an octopus with a head roughly the size of a Doberman. No one came to his aid, and he quickly fell to his knees. The last few screeching breaths left his lungs. I watched on in concentrated frozen terror through the last few still-lit flickering torchlights as Daryl's right hand came up in an arched claw to dig into the thing's chewy flesh. And then Daryl went still altogether. Margaret launched towards the thing, totally ignoring the falling fish, arching an axe as she might a baseball bat, and swatted the octopus off Daryl's prone head. Snapping out of it, I sped forward, grabbing a hold of Daryl's wrists and grabbing him to the relative safety of the big rock as Margaret stood guard. He did not kick or scream, and I wished that he were only unconscious. As Margaret returned to the shelter of the rock, we went to shine a light on Daryl. His face was no longer a face, but a skull with open optic holes through which only pink brain could be seen. I recoiled. "That's not normal," said Margaret, shaking her head and kicking the rock face as she planted a flat hand against it. Looking back now, I think to myself what a strange thing that is to say. But in dire circumstances, the thing that needs to be said is so far from one's grasp that it, too, becomes fleeting, illusory, and there is nothing save the obvious and concrete. No, this was not normal. What are we gonna do? My voice was small, caught in my throat. I was surprised that anyone could hear me over the sound of the fish rain, but Linus did. We moved to the city where it's safe. There's no going back now. He wants us here. Even with the mad twinkle in his eye, I could nearly hear the fear in his voice. What exactly it was and why it wanted us here, I couldn't say. We stayed pressed to the rock till the fish stopped falling. By the time they did, we were nearly up to our knees in them. Their dead eyes looked up at us, and sometimes their tails would twitch, forcing me to double-take to make sure there was not another tentacled creature among them. As we pushed on, stepping over or around the dying and dead fish, we came to a flat, open area of ground that encompassed the city of spires. It seemed it had been intentionally worn down. With every step, I felt we were more vulnerable. A spotlight from one of those horrid watchers passed over us as we marched, and I could nearly feel the heat off it. We froze, and the watcher ignored us, pivoting the light in another direction. I wondered if it could even sense our presence at all. My legs began to feel heavy, my arms too. But this wasn't the normal sort of tiredness I'd been experiencing up until that point. It felt as though I'd been drugged. Looking around at my neighbors as we went, I could sense a daze in them as well. I watched as their limbs moved in slow motion, and it occurred to me that we were hardly making any leeway whatsoever. "Does anyone else feel tired?" I asked. "Yeah." I twisted my head around to see it was Linus. "Now that you mention it, I am really feeling tired. It's like all I want to do is lay down and sleep. God, I've never felt like this before." I felt like someone was trying to pull my eyelids closed with pinched fingers. Something was amiss. The city of spires ahead grew foggy, and the fires that illuminated it flickered. No, I was blinking. The slow blink of someone on the verge of sleep. Someone's cries met my ears. I turned my head to the right to see that Terry was sliding his feet along the smooth stone floor. "Why'd Rogers have to die? It should have been me." He said the words so much like facts, while his ankles shifted forward in stumbling steps. The pickaxe Terry grinded along the floor of the cavern as he dragged it with a limp wrist by the handle. A chorus of other tools soon followed, as we all began to carry our tools this way. Terry's eyes welled up with tears. I should have died. He was losing his mind. It was all too much. No amount of what I said would be able to snap him out of it. He was giving up. He choked. I just want to die. It was the wail of a dying critter. Hey, I tried. It's gonna be alright, Terry. It's gonna be okay. Just push on. Don't give up. We're gonna make it out of here. No. For the briefest of moments, his eyes grew lucid as they met mine. No, we're not, Clay. That's okay, though. I'm just gonna lie down for a little while. I heard the handle of his pickaxe clang against the floor. He was no longer dragging it. I'm just gonna lie down and catch up with you later, alright? Don't do that. I tried shaking my head quickly to jumpstart myself out of the strange affliction. Margaret called out from somewhere behind. Don't go to sleep. She sounded like she was having a hard time speaking. It's trying to make us go to sleep. Terry fell to his knees. Just gonna close my eyes. It'll all be over soon enough. He fell onto the solid ground with a dull thud. Another body ahead of me fell. It was the lady who ran the salon down the road.
Sleep is for humans.
Then someone
I
else
don't
off
have
left.
to sleep if I don't want to.
It wasn't long till we were dropping like flies. Every thud of a body on the hard ground was another
It's
stake to the
for
heart.
humans only.
Made me wonder how long I would last.
Sleeping.
Margaret called out from somewhere behind again. Clay?
So if I was
Still awake
there,
up there?
it wouldn't affect me.
Yeah.
That
Still
being.
here.
I mean,
No,
after
it's not hard
all,
to make it, Clay.
I'm a god.
Can you do me a favor?
Well, they're just
I
human.
have a granddaughter. If you make it out of here, will you tell her I love her? There were a series of snuffles. Will you tell her I love her and that I'm sorry I couldn't see her grow to a woman? Can you do that for me? No. I was surprised how much command I still had over my own voice. Even though I could no longer turn my head to look behind, I could only see the rotating watchers and city
I'm a
behind.
bond.
I did not want to lose Margaret. I can't do that. Because you're gonna make it out of here, same as me, you hear me? A few more bodies struck the ground and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears was the only thing for miles. I waited and waited and waited for her response. Every step forward I took was met with nothing but the sounds of my neighbors dropping. Was she already asleep? Had she succumbed to the wicked magic of the cavern? Was I the last one standing?
You're strong
Has
though.
it become my eternity walking toward a dark city suspended in infinite time?
But the rest of them are weak.
Okay.
I have to give him that. He's strong.
And
But
hearing
the
her
rest?
voice, I felt a new strength in my legs, and even as
Weak.
my muscles met resistance like I was pushing through water, I began stomping defiantly towards the watchers. And the sounds of others' footfalls came too. Then the sinking feeling I had had in the pit of my stomach began to disappear, and I was sprinting. I'd broken the threshold of the spell, it seemed. As my muscles felt normal once more, I stopped and turned around.
Yeah, you're strong.
Laid out before me was mostly
Human.
bodies. The only ones left were me and Margaret and Linus. He pushed on, slapping his
So there
face
is-
while she
so there
blinked
is
repeatedly
others.
and rubbed her eyes.
Cool. Then you're all
Never felt
strong.
anything like that before, said Linus. I can't believe I made it. There was nearly a cheeriness in his voice until he met me and looked out on the bodies. The many dead forms of the group falling behind.
And the bond.
My God, said Margaret. Red tendrils spilled from the dark recesses of the ceiling, reaching for the extremities of the dead or sleeping, and suspended them in midair like puppets for a moment before carefully, almost delicately pulling them up and from her eyes into the shadows. As the
and the blunt.
Who would construct buildings that can never be used? You guys ever see anything like this? He asked. No, said Margaret. As we passed by the massive thorny buildings striking up at the ceiling of the cavern, we were cast in shadows. Margaret and I both removed flashlights, but hardly cut through the blackness ahead. It was a constant fear that something would slither from the darkness and snatch us away to some torturous fate. Thinking of the faces I'd seen in the ceiling, I felt my arms spring alive with goose flesh. Linus caught my uneasiness and he reached out to pat me on the shoulder. I flinched. Whoa, he said. Calm down there, good buddy. There's no reason to be so jumpy. I'm not. I shrugged while turning my attention back to the bear. Linus went to it and Margaret and I both followed him. He hunkered down over it and prodded it with the end of his index finger and then looked over his shoulder. Again? He asked, apparently to no one. Linus stood and looked to the black expanse above. We've seen this already, he shouted, and his voice echoed back at him. Did you hear me? You've already done this. Whether or not Linus summoned what was to follow, I'm unsure. But when I look back on the words I've written so far, I want nothing more than to reach through the words and throttle him. There's no changing the past. A great groaning escaped from somewhere in the shadows overhead, and I half expected the great red tentacle beasts from above to come down and make us their playthings. But they did not. Instead, shattering glass rained from above. I was left frozen as the shards seemed to materialize from seemingly nothing. I put my arms over my head and hurried to the black spire, hoping to find some cover from the fallen glass. But the tower did a little. A few darting shards caught my legs, but I felt nothing through the rush of adrenaline. Linus stood in the center of the market, face up, screaming. His voice could scarcely be heard over the shattering glass. As he twisted around, gripping his face, I could see that a thorn of glass had driven its way into his left eye. Blood rushed down the front of his shirt. Margaret clung to me and I to her. Shit, shit, shit! She was yelling directly into my ear, eyes clenched shut and fingers digging into my arm. I began feeling around the wall of the flat-sided tower as we inched our way around it. My fingers met an opening and I pulled Margaret in there with me. We fell in and she scrambled in the dark to withdraw her flashlight, while I peered out from the crevice in the tower to scream towards Linus. I saw him dancing in the square with his hands at his face. Over here! Come over here! As the words left my mouth, Linus twisted to face me and I caught another good look at the gory mess. He latched a hand onto the shard of glass jutting from his eye, and his fingers slid down the sharpened edge of it, cutting his hand and causing it to slip as he attempted to pry it from his face. He latched on with both hands and finally launched the thing from his eye socket. I did it, he said, torrents of blood rushing from his head. The glass rain did not let up, and he seemed not to even notice as it diced his exposed arms to flayed ribbons that hung off him in cords, exposing the tissue beneath. Linus! I was too late. The ship's mast fell from the ceiling, landing directly on top of him. It crushed him, and I recoiled back into the dark recesses of the crevice we found. My stomach lurched, thinking of the way he'd become no more than a stain. The sound of clinking glass continued, and I dared to peek once more, ignoring the spot where Linus's raspberry squashed remains were. There, crashing over the towering structures and sending up plumes of debris and hunks of stone, was the bow of a ship whirling through the air. Margaret looked at me, dark circles forming around her eyes that I'm sure I reciprocated. A handful of short red streaks ran the length of her face where the glass had caught her. A stinging soreness in my own cheeks confirmed that I must have looked much the same. The stress we'd been under was beginning to take its toll. It's just you and me now, I informed her. The frankness with which I delivered the news scared me. I know, she sighed. There's stairs over there. I grabbed her by the shoulders. We're both gonna make it out of here, aren't we? When had I started shaking her? She ripped herself out of my hands. Clay, stick at her. What would happen if I were to just take a seat on one of those steps and refuse to continue? With everything in me, I believe I could have taken a seat and died. Wasting away in a dark tower would have been a fate less abominable than the unimaginable horrors beyond, surely. I'm afraid that if I had not had Margaret ahead of me, pushing on with her wiry, persistent limbs, that may have been what happened. Whatever the opposite of concentration, that's what I found in those lingering, dark moments in the stairwell. It became a steady zombie walk of doom, where living ceased being a thing and there was only movement. The repetition of it lulled me to a place in my mind where things were better. On our way up, we went by slitted openings in the stone like ancient fortress windows that allowed us to look upon the city of twisted buildings. The glass had stopped coming down. I could no longer hear the sound of the ship crashing over rooftops. Somehow the silence was worse. Things would never be the same. I would forever remember that place, and those quiet nights I'd find my eyes going out of focus. Daydreaming would become a thing of the long-forgotten past, because I would always be returned there when imagination came. Are you alright? Asked Margaret without looking over her shoulder or slowing her pace. I think so. Just making sure I'm not alone. I know what you mean. She angled her pace around the middle pillar of the stairwell, ever tightening its bend. What if there's no end? What do you mean? I mean, what if it goes on forever? There's always an end. My mind was programmed from a lifetime of constructed narratives that forced a sense of purpose on me and my actions. There's always an end. How do you know? What if we just keep going on forever?
Just walk the
Her
back
voice was
rooms.
shaking. I don't think that's gonna happen. I hoped
It's
aloud.
infinite, so how would you know
That's not how it works.
there's end?
We're gonna get out of this, remember? Just like we talked about. You and me will.
And just walk the SCP stairs.
I know I am.
Well, it's infinite.
I said
There's
this in the
no
most
end.
reassuring way that I could without actually believing it, even if I wanted to. She stopped. I think I see it. The opening. It's just up ahead. There was hope in their voice that twisted my entrails. The truth was evident. Beyond her silhouetted shoulder, I could spy dancing warm light. Our pace quickened as we broke the surface at the pinnacle of the spire.
And
I
the
slammed
bomb.
into her without meaning to. We were holding hands not as lovers, but as humans. Because we were scared. At the clean, flat top that stretched to a diameter of 20 yards, we stood together aghast at the creature there. The unmoving, half-human-seeming thing
This will
gurgled
be the
as its
school
chest rose and
library
fell.
and
It sat in a chair in the same
principal's
onyx I'd
office.
seen on the inner wall of the city.
the front desk office as well.
We wagered a few steps towards the thing.
Actually,
lying
just the
standing
principal's
towards us.
office.
Its eyes were wide open, white, forgotten by sunlight, so the pupils and irises had taken on a milky blue quality.
Matter of fact,
The thing's arms were snapped into the chair.
principal's
black snaking
office
tubes gored
is
into the
gonna
forearms,
be
frozen so hard that it could not move. The opposite ends of the tubes snaked into the ceiling.
here.
It stared directly up to the dark shadows or clouds above. Not even its mouth was free of its own cord that no doubt plumbed the depths of its stomach. As we grew nearer, I could see dry tear stains trace the creases of its crow's feet. And its beard was no longer full, but kinked and thin from duress.
Pardon me.
I choked out. The thing in the seat did not respond to my voice. On approach, I could see the reason for this. Its ears had been clogged and locked in place by those same black tubes. My God, hushed Margaret. We went to Harold then, not knowing what to do. As I touched his cool, naked skin, he seemed to respond in a mumble groan around the thin tube trapped in his throat. Why was I crying? I reached for one of the tubes while Margaret watched me with steady eyes. Neither of us knew what to do, but that was not going to stop me from doing what came next. It was a panic that had jumped into my fingers as I clawed at one of the tubes in his left arm. I yanked it, and he let out an awful scream as sludge shot from the place I'd freed the tube, spraying me in the face. I let it fall to the side, totally stunned. What was I going to do? Would he die if I pulled him from the chair? Was he too far gone? Then a whirring began that echoed. The sound of suction filled my ears, and I watched in horror as the tubes attached to Harold began sucking something out of him. I His eyes closed and he cried, whimpering tears. I could not see through the vacant black tubes, and to this day I do not know what it drew from him. But when the silence came, it was maddening. Margaret looked at me. She held her hands to her forehead, perpetually swiping her hair back in a frantic manner. What's happening? Jesus Christ, what's happening? And then it began to rain again. No, not rain. It hailed, and thousands of pinking little balls fell from that black sky and rained down on our heads. I closed my eyes and went to Margaret, and we tried our best to shield one another from what came, screaming like we'd screamed in that place so many times already. The twinkling glow caught my eyes as it gathered around our feet, and I could see that the hail was not ice or rocks. They were made of gold. I snapped from my terror and brought one of them up and held it to my face. Through squinted eyes, Margaret shouted at me, "What are you doing?" I held up the circle. They're wedding bands. She opened her eyes and looked through the hole in the center of the ring I was holding. I glanced toward Harold. This is his place, I think. What? There are things darker in the human mind than there are out there in space. No dark gods compare to the inner workings of the human mind. The potentiality of our own terribleness cannot be overstated. Those previous
Oh
sentences
no.
are post-rationalization.
There is things out
In that
there
moment, I couldn't put the words in place like that. I simply shook my head and dropped the ring.
for you humans just waiting
The rings came down, and I pattered to
until
the
they
opening
get
at the
you.
top of the spire toward the way we'd already come. Margaret had been right.
Much worse than human imagination.
I was going to try, even if it killed me. Her fingers dug into my arm, and she whipped me around. We can't leave him. She glanced over at the thing in the chair, still sputtering, gasping for air around the tube fixed in his lips. Not like that.
He's dead.
There was a pause before she looked back
There's
to me.
nothing you can do.
I wouldn't want to be left like that, would you? I looked to the axe in her hand. How was it that she'd kept it so long? Through everything. Not like that. We can't do it like that. We were screaming to one another over the clinking of the metal rain. What
Born.
choice is there? Her fingers tightened around the handle of the axe. We can do it quick. I looked to the pitiful Harold and nodded. She moved quickly. It was a task no one wanted a part in, and the faster it was over, the better. Margaret launched the axe into his chest with a quick heave. His body lurched and spasmed before going still. She ripped the axe away, and blood sprayed as his chest opened wide. The wedding rings stopped falling, with the last few ringing out somewhere far away. All was quiet, with Margaret covered in Harold's blood like war paint. The cavern air changed. There was nothing. We were standing in a vacuum that might crush us at any moment. And the world began crumbling. A cave-in was my initial thought. That was ridiculous, of course. Cave-ins didn't happen in places that didn't exist. Such tragedies were for the real world. We parted there long ago. The world was shaking. The spire trembled, threatening to give way at any moment. The rumbling was all I could hear. Margaret screeched out something, but I couldn't understand. She hung onto the edge of one of the tubes attached to Harold's body. She was waving at me. I stumbled over and fell onto my knees, trying to crawl to her. Her mouth moved as I tried deciphering what she was saying, and a great boulder fell from the sky and sheared away the opening of the stairwell behind me. I twisted around on my back to watch it fall away as spider-crack lines shot in my direction. I'm certain I was screaming as I moved. I felt a pair of ice-cold hands on my neck and craned around to see Margaret. She screamed over the roar of the falling debris. I can see light! She pointed in the most unexpected of directions. She pointed at Harold's chest. She shifted to the front of him that had been pried open by the axe. I watched dumbfounded as she pushed her fingers into his chest and opened them more. Indeed, natural light spilled from there. I was immediately reminded of the mumbles of my dead neighbors. The only way was through.
This
So he
is
said,
the robbery.
Margaret
And that
placed her knee on his
star
thigh and
principles off.
ripped his chest open. I crawled over on shaking arms and pulled myself up to gander in. It was a dream. That I could see trees and perhaps even a touch of real air. I am not proud of this. I pushed my fist into him and began worming my way in. Freedom was so close I could nearly taste it. Swimming in the visceral ooze in the place between here and there is a feeling I will never wash clean. Digging my claws in, I propelled myself forward like a deranged newborn pulling itself free from its tense mother. There was no longer a Harold or Margaret or even me. There was only the ravenous, growing urge to escape. I kicked my way through intestines until I tugged away at clumps of dirt and took in labored breaths of fresh air. The sun splintered overhead as I sat choking in the open hole of Harold's front yard. I hawked up a lump of wet mud and scooted onto my knees to peer into the place I'd come from. There was no opening leading back there anymore. In its place,
And then born.
there was only a grouping of loose dirt. I watched and waited and was all alone. I wept and swiped tears away with dry, cracked hands. Come on, I said at the pile. Come on. The words spit from my mouth. The dirt remained still with no trace of life. Please, I begged, whatever it was that had created such a cruel world. I screamed like a madman. It started out small. The pebbles of minuscule bald clay fell away and rolled like children down a grassy hill. A finger with splintered caked nails sprang forth, and then came the whole hand and the forearm. I wrapped my hands around the thin wrist and tugged with everything I had. And Margaret's head came forth, hair clinging to her head. She gasped, open-mouthed and eyes closed. Once she was free, she wiped at her face. After a brief coughing fit where she put her head between her knees as I patted her on the back, she began crying. We made it, I said, the elation in my voice reaching a point of absurdity. There's no reason for that anymore. We made it. She looked at me. I know. Margaret patted the dust off her shirt. There was a time in there I saw your feet just above my head. I saw you kicking. You were gonna make it out, then I felt something grab me from behind. I was stuck. Your feet disappeared and I couldn't move anymore. I almost died. I could feel whatever it was squeezing the life out of me. It was the thought I had, though. I looked at her puzzled. At least you were gonna make it out. That's what I thought. That'd be something, at least. Margaret, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't. We sat there, curled up on that spot in the bottom of the pit for too long. There was an investigation into the matter by the police. You can't have half a neighborhood disappear without it raising a few eyebrows. Neither me nor Margaret told the whole story. But the
Smart
police
idea.
received what we knew they'd believe.
Uh,
There was a maniac caught among the crowd of people gathered in Harold's front yard, and we couldn't stop digging. We told him that much, and that much was enough. The official record went that we were victims of hysteria. We told them of a cave-in, and that most of the people were caught in it. They excavated the lot Harold's house stood on and never found a thing.
smart.
I never figured they would. We each got our share of fines and community service. In the courtroom, I recall the judge sneering at me from her high chair as I pled my case. There was jail time for me, but Margaret's lawyer was better. She visited me sometimes. It was time well spent in comparison to what I'd seen. When I got out, Margaret introduced me to her granddaughter. As me and the old lady who once jogged around the neighborhood grew closer, I came to realize her granddaughter was all she had left. And it finally made sense to me that her last request would have something to do with her. We don't talk about that place often. But when we do, it always ends in long nights, where we chat over 4 or 5 bottles of wine or whatever else is nearby. She's a fair amount older than I am, and I know that I'll be the last. Unless by some miracle the old bird loves us all. Given what she's capable of, I would believe it's possible. I joke like that to make it seem far and away. Do not let this serve as some fable of morals or fault. It was never about blame, anyhow. This was about one man's inability to let go of the past.
To this now.
Murky shoreline was swarming with cops and crime scene officials, their voices mingling with the droning buzz of mosquitoes and the bellow of bullfrogs in the marsh. As I approached, I heard the sound of someone retching and spitting into the nearby weeds. I spotted the source of the noise and went over to find my weak-stomached deputy throwing up in the reeds. Whether it was from something he'd seen or from his drinking the night before, I'd find out soon enough. Last thing we need is more DNA fouling at the crime scene, I told him. Get back in the car if you can't keep your breakfast down. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, which confirmed to me he'd been drinking. But that was nothing new. Randy always wound up with a bottle in his hand after hours. He was a functioning alcoholic, but just barely. I needed a reliable deputy for this case. The things this psychopath was leaving behind in his wake were disturbing, to say the least. Sorry, boss. I'll be alright, Randy said. Prepare yourself, that's all I'm gonna say. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and took a deep breath. Then the two of us approached the crime scene together. Immediately I understood why he was sick to his stomach. And despite what drinking he might have done the night before, the vomiting wasn't the result of that. A man's pale, waterlogged face stared up at me from inside a boat which had been dragged into the water. Only his head, hands, and feet could be seen poking out from the hull. The rest of his body was obscured by another boat which had been laid on top of him, crushing his torso, arms, and legs. What the hell am I looking at here? I asked, feeling last night's dinner rising up in my gorge. The coroner gave me an odd look, then hooked his thumb over his shoulder, pointing at the man behind him. Ask Sherlock Holmes over there. Slightly annoyed at the deferral, I looked to see where Bill was pointing, then noticed for the first time the navy blue jacket with the letters FBI on the back. Hey, you with the Bureau? I asked, holding out my hand. I'm the sheriff. The man stayed stubbornly hunched over, ignoring me while he examined some clue. I cleared my throat, no response. Tapping on the man's shoulder, he finally turned around, and I saw he had a pair of wireless earbuds in and was listening to music. When he saw me, he pulled the headphones out of his ears and stuck out his hand to shake mine. Sorry about that. It helps me concentrate. I'm Leonard Finch, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Your boss called for us, said you didn't want the help, but he thought you needed it. I tried not to wince. Well, we appreciate any assistance we can get. Bill, the coroner, he said you could give me something to go on here. The man motioned with his hands toward the victim. The boats, he said simply, as if that explained everything. I'm sorry, what about the boats? The boats. You've never heard of it? Fairly straightforward as far as Roman torture methods go. At least, I'm assuming that's what we've got here. We'll have to lift up the top boat to be sure. He took a minute to explain briefly what he meant and what would need to be done. Alright, let's do it. Everybody get what they need? I asked the coroner and crime scene investigators. We need to lift this off the victim to get a better look. After several more minutes of formalities, some final pictures were taken, and then several of us went around the sides of the boat to lift the top vessel from its position where it had been left, crushing the man. As we began to heave and lift with all of our strength, the agent talked in the background, almost to himself. Invented by the ancient Romans, the boats was a method of torture which involved crushing a man by sandwiching him between two boats. The top one to keep him in place for part 2 of the procedure. The boats are dragged into a swamp with the man's hands, head, and feet hanging out from the end. His extremities are painted with honey to attract the insects and animals. The Romans would then force feed their victims victim warm milk and honey, a powerful laxative. And with that, the real entertainment begins. Drawn in by the smell of food, swamp vermin enter the boat, begin to feed on the victim. He is kept alive through the entire ordeal, so that he feels everything. Essentially, the subject is eaten alive by rats, mice, and swamp creatures, while buried up to his neck in his own shit. The process takes a long time, prolonging the suffering of the victim. We lifted the top boat as he finished speaking, and hundreds of rats, mice, insects, and snakes suddenly began to pour and tumble over the sides, scurrying away from their prize. The body was exactly as described, partially eaten by vermin and submerged in a cesspool of body fluids. It stunk worse than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. The sewage smell mixed with blood and the sweetness of honey that was cloying and made my head feel like it was swimming. The faces around me turned pale and slightly gray at the horrifying sight of the victim, and all of us hurried out of the algae-coated water. I saw rats swarming in the green muck by our feet, racing back onto dry land, and away from all the lights and commotion. Several people who I knew to be consummate professionals ran away from the scene, screaming and cursing loudly. A moment later, I ran over to vomit in the exact same spot where Randy had been when I arrived. When I looked back, I saw the FBI agent was shaking his head, looking annoyed. "Thanks for adding some more DNA to the crime scene, Sheriff. That's very helpful." Later that morning, with the crime scene sufficiently scoured for evidence, I began heading back to the slope towards my car. Agent Finch was calling me from the water, hurrying to catch up with me. "Sorry about earlier, Sheriff," he said. "Sometimes I forget that not everyone sees the same things I do on a daily basis. That's no excuse for being an asshole, though. I think I'm being funny sometimes when really I'm just being obnoxious. At least that's what my wife tells me." I laughed at the self-deprecating comment. She's a smart woman, I thought to myself. Hey, it's okay. I told the same thing to my deputy when I caught him puking his guts out in pretty much that exact same spot.